and discuss some strategies that are applicable to business as well, and then review some of the readings that we've put together, and then just to give you some idea of the supports that are available at DELTS as well, because, for example, we were talking about YouTube, and to answer some of your questions with private, sometimes private information, not wanting to do that, we do have some tips on that. And also, some people still don't want to put their video up on YouTube for whatever reason. You can upload it, DELTS will give you a space so that you can upload it to DELTS. We'll give you a link back that can embed in your course, because as you know, trying to upload it through D2L sometimes it takes a long time. So you can send it over. So a couple little tips like that as well. Okay, so I'll pass it over, and I should have introduced myself, I guess. I'm Pam Phillips. I'm a senior instructional designer with DELTS, and I'm familiar with some of your faces because I sit on your faculty council as well. And this is Jane Costello.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Jane Costello, also from DELTS, a senior instructional designer, and I know some of you as well, having worked on some course developments with you in the past. And so we just wanted to talk a little bit today about the flipped classroom, perhaps some strategies that you could use in delivering or setting up your flipped classroom approach. We have a very brief sample of some readings that we found that were applicable to business, which we thought might be helpful to you for anyone who needs something else to read in their time off, sort of thing. And then identify some of the support services that are available at DELTS that can help you. Lyle gave a great perspective on the use of YouTube and Google+, the Google Groups, the Hangouts, and then there's some services that DELTS also mimics that you might want to consider as well. And then, of course, any questions. Okay, so hopefully the cards and the stickies have made their way around. So if everyone has a couple of cards and or a couple of stickies, we want you to take a couple of minutes and to do two things for us. On a card or a sticky, your choice, write down what you think a flipped classroom is.
And based on what Lyle went over, you might be able to write some of that. See, it's kind of a little quiz now to see if you were listening to what Lyle said.
This is the test part of your presentation to see if you were listening to it.
Kind of, yeah. So we're approaching it now based on what you've said. See if they've learned it.
Can I watch the video before I answer?
You were supposed to have watched that last night, Will.
You're not going to have all these. First, no pressure. Here. You sure?
Yeah, I'll take it.
If not.
So what are we doing?
You're writing down.
It's bad for your teachers.
That's okay. Oh, I know. What your understanding is of a flipped classroom. What is a flipped classroom? And all has to stay on one card or one sticky.
Oh, wait, you didn't tell me that ahead of time.
I'm clarifying.
Personally, I can write really small.
There it is here. Yes,
Yesterday, I
there it
had
is here.
a paper of a title and abstract for a journal, and reading with all the co-authors, finding it finalized, enter the data today, and they say 100 character limitation on title, 500 character limitation. I have to review them again.
Do the entire thing. Okay, so when you have that ready, maybe Patty can collect those for us. And then you're going to use another sticky or another index card. And then we're going to have you do something else. And that is, no. We lost the slide. Okay, so this is moving oddly. We want you to write down some of the current instructional strategies you're using in your class now. So they could be if you're lecturing typically, or if you're using cases, or if you have guests, or if you have group work, debates, that sort of thing. Just make note of some of those. And again, it has to fit on just one card or one sticky, but you can note as many as you want in the 1 minute.
So by card, just the definition, is that a card?
That's a card.
You never know. Come on.
Not Jack of Spades.
now some people are working with the sticky size, and some people are working with the 3x5s.
How come your card's bigger than everybody else's, Tom?
That's why we gave choice, Lyle, to each
Okay,
his own.
okay.
There's so many ways I can answer that.
That's why I structured the question that way.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so just at random, I don't know who wrote what for sure. I know one person is writing, but that's it. So just at random, I'm going to pick a couple of these and read them out, and then we're going to look at the definition that we found that we feel is pretty straightforward. Okay, this one. Flipped is focused more on online. Example, watch video online first and then discuss it in the class.
That's me.
Excellent. You can identify yourselves or you can remain anonymous.
So much for anonymity on that one.
As you wish. Yeah. Online learning of concepts plus face-to-face application of concepts through problem solving and discussion. Okay. All theory is to be learned before going to class. The class time is to be used for students to work on problems. Okay, and then maybe one more, the blue one. Flipped, student learns technology knowledge before class on their own, and class time is used for activities and problem solving. Okay, so our definition of a flipped class, we found two that we liked that were very concise. So the first one, obviously a pedagogical model, in which the typical lecture and homework elements of a course are reversed. So the student does the work on their own, reviewing the materials that you prepared for them in advance, and then when they come to class, there's an opportunity for them to have questions or whatnot clarified, and then they apply that in some way when they're with you face to face. So it's an application of the information that they learned.
That says revised there, is it supposed to say reversed? Of course.
Yes, typing.
Okay,
Thank you
sorry.
very much. We'll fix that for next time
Yeah.
around if we ever get invited anywhere else.
David doesn't miss many
There you
times.
go. That's good.
Yeah, it's not work.
Because that would make sense too. In a way, so it's, you know,
Yeah, good.
Or another definition from the Chronicle of Higher Ed, and I believe some people here are familiar with that particular journal as well. It inverts the traditional relationship of students and faculty members, so essentially the same thing. Is the flipped approach is more of a student-centered approach to learning as opposed to the traditional method, which is very much an instructor-led. The instructor still has a very prominent role in this, but the focus of their activity shifts slightly. So you're going to spend more time up front preparing for the students' pre-class work. So they're the reviewing of the theory or the concepts. And you may include some self-checks in that so that the student, you have an opportunity to see how well the students are grasping the information that you're giving. And then you can check the results of those self-checks, and when they come to class, review those areas that are still fuzzy, and then bring in an activity where they're going to apply that knowledge. Okay, and then of course give them feedback again on how they're progressing as that moves on. So Pam is collecting the other sticky or card that you wrote out for us. Any questions about, other than the typographical error, any questions about the definition of a flipped class? This is not a new thing. It's a new label on actually a very old approach. Yes?
So something personally, which I hadn't really thought of before this, was that I used to teach a negotiations course, in which during the classroom time we did practically no discussion of the text or the assigned readings or any of that sort of stuff. We did negotiations in the class.
Or you do that first thing when they come in, that's up to you, and you can change it up. I mean, you don't have to follow the same, you know, approach each time.
I've used DELT for almost all my in-class course and online courses, of course. And I know you can track students' progress, like if they've read through what you've, in terms of how much time they spend on it and things like that. Do we have the ability to check what things they've looked at? So if you were to do a genuine flipped classroom, put your videos through DELT instead of YouTube or something like that, is there a way, let's say for participation, if we had some grade associated with it to kind of amp up the fact that they have to really do it, can we see if they viewed the videos specifically?
You can see
or can we only see progress, you know, generally?
It's progress. You see that they've gone to the video. You can use other analytic tools to see how much time they've spent
on the video.
On
so
the
you can
video
go
or
to that
on the video.
specific
It doesn't necessarily mean they've actually watched it.
No, but I just
They
think
play
it's
and go back to
something,
sport.
it's something other than saying, did you watch it? That's all I'm trying to.
Yeah.
And YouTube too, I think, Lyle, right, can track like
Oh,
the
YouTube
number
does
of
as well?
users,
Yeah,
or you
it
can
tracks
show
the number of views and it
users.
tracks the drop off, and so
Yeah.
what you know, I have if I'm doing quizzes in classes, I've used, when I see that there was a particular pre-class preparation that was not quite as attended to as it should have been, I put a lot more emphasis on that piece of the pre-class preparation into the quiz to wake them up and say, you can't skip this crap, and sort of bring it back a little bit from there.
But I think it's important. Go ahead.
So we're having these same discussions over in medicine with their undergrad curriculum, and it's very early stages. But I know one question that's going to come up, probably the first question is, you know, what's the evidence? So is there any evidence or literature that shows
effective?
that flipped classroom results in better learning outcomes? It's a more efficient way for students to learn. I mean, I know one question that the students are going to have is, isn't this going to mean that it's more instructional hours or learning time for us? Like if we have to listen to a lecture before we come to class, then it's 2 times the amount of learning
No,
time.
it just means that the focus becomes front heavy rather than back heavy. So instead of them going back home and reviewing everything and then coming up with the questions and then going back, they've done all that prep work up front. It's just a shift of when they're doing that work. And there is there's plenty of literature out there, and we looked purposely today on the business side, but in doing so, some of the literature reviews in some of the articles we found did reference medicine, for example, and physics and other disciplines. But you have to be careful when you're asking, is it better than another method? There's a no significant difference debate, which has been proven that it's a faulty thinking to try to compare the two, to compare one method to another method, because you will find in the end that there is no significant difference. It's not really meaningful. So what you need to look at is, for this context, for this, you know, these students, this course, this topic, is this an appropriate venue? Are the students attaining that 80% of the class is getting 80% or better? That sort of approach. And that will give you a sounder reasoning for adopting a method.
And it's like, I guess too, it depends on, as you said earlier, if they're reviewing the lectures home, when they come to the classroom, they don't want you to lecture again.
Yeah.
So that's when they will complain. And it was also like when we first rolled out, I remember teaching and actually doing my master's at university, where we rolled out online discussions, and back then it was WebCT, or not D2L. And I remember one faculty person had me in the lab with my colleagues like this, communicating just a discussion forum to each other, and we were in the room.
Yeah.
So we were like, why would we communicate with each other in the lab here, online discussions, when we're in the room? So it's known when to use the tools. And some research that we recently did as well, called TPAC model, which talks about exactly that, the 4 levels of when you would use certain tools, and thinking about your pedagogy, thinking about your content and the situation, and then determining what you would use and when. So the key here is to make sure that your class activities are not the same as what you're telling students to do outside class.
Are student satisfaction scores typically better or the same for
What we've seen is that towards the beginning of the term, because it's so new, students are apprehensive and instructors are a bit worried about it, and they're not so keen on it. So there's probably 75% not in favor. At the end of the semester, 75% of the students love it, and the instructor loves it. So you got to stick with it, and that's one of the messages.
And some of the research that we just read on physics itself, they had a lot of people start out using it, a lot of faculty start out using it, but in the end, everybody dropped off because of the bad feedback from students. I don't like it. I didn't do, it's not what I signed up for. And in one of the courses I was teaching, it was you got to really have a tough skin in some ways for some of it, because a couple of the comments, and we looked at it, was, I do all the work and she does nothing. And because you're facilitating, you're asking them to do research in the computer in the lab. And it was the same person that kept saying that to me while I was teaching. Probably about 3 years later, I ran into that person at a conference. And she was presenting, and afterwards, the principal came up and spoke to me and said, now I get it. Because lots of times you're preparing them for what they would have to do out in the workforce in that particular area, whether it's accounting or marketing, and they don't get it. So they think that they're here for us to stand up and lecture, give them what we think is going to be covered on the test, and give it back to us.
The biggest thing that I've noticed in my classes is when I put a lot more stuff that I pre-prepared that they watched beforehand, the actual classes are far more interactive and far more enjoyable, both from the students and me, because rather than me pushing, it's like, we're here, we're having a conversation now. We're going to have a discussion now, which if you're trying to deliver theory and content, you can add little pieces, but you're breaking up your theory and content delivery with, okay, are there any questions, and trying to sort of drag them out of this lull of listening into, now you want to talk. If the whole class is just, we're going to sit down, we're going to have a dialogue, we're going to discuss, we're going to do this there, the amount of student participation from my experiences in my cases were much higher. And that was the part where the students sort of enjoyed that part of class. It's almost sort of like, you're almost going back to the Socrates methods where you just sit around and chat about things to sort of gain your theory.
Mary, you had a question today?
Yeah, I was just thinking about experiential learning and research that's out there on that. There's some good research there that will kind of validate. And I'm also thinking that I guess you have to adjust your assessment in terms of your final, in terms of whatever you're using. Because then if you're going to test them on the theory only, you're probably going to get the kind of feedback that, I'm doing all the work. But if you kind of draw on some of the exercises
and that was one of the things that came out in the business research that we did, was that they did change some of their assessment, and some of the answers to the questions were, students were actually bringing in from the textbook, also bringing in from what they learned in classroom from each other. And they quoted each other in some of, like in the research paper or in the actual exam, long answer question, right? I think you had a question?
Yeah, I'm just wondering how, do you find, the tools you implement them at all different levels of courses?
Yeah, I have used these techniques anywhere from intro marketing at the undergrad level, intro marketing at the MBA level, and final year strategy component.
I teach mostly required courses, which means you have X amount of students who are asleep, and X amount of students who love it, and X amount of, I'm just trying to figure out how useful it would be in intro required accounting.
Yeah, I mean, I've adapted it, but again, it's like you have to pick the right portfolio and the right execution of those portfolio tools for the year of their degree, the type of degree, and the course content that you're teaching as well. It's like it's about finding a nugget in all of these discussions. And hey, that might be something that can be kind of cool. Whether it's just a pen casting or whether it's full blown. It's what's going to work for what your needs are for your.
And there was one thing with the accounting that we read, and I think you passed out the article, was that she had said that her lecture didn't totally stop. When she had students review things before class, when they came in, the way she started class was, okay, do anybody have any questions? So if people that actually really did read the material did have questions, and it ended up that she was doing mini lectures because of questions. And the people that didn't read, they did gather from, learn from that, but she actually was more focused on what students wanted. And after if there was no questions, she said, no lecture. We're going to do, this was in an economics class where they said they were going to do their actual activity.
Yeah, like from an intro perspective, like where you're talking about intro accounting, I know in intro marketing, I would deliver.
And what we'll do is we have this little 2-page document that we're going to share with you, and we can send it electronically as well, Lyle.
Great.
And so you can have a look at that, and it's a starting point. And then you can decide for yourself exactly where you stand and what you want to start with. Baby steps. Okay, and then move on.
And so some of the strategies, we noticed that some of you have listed some of those as well, which is good. Because what we were thinking is, as we said, it's not a new model. Some of us have been trying it in classrooms forever. And one prof said, and some of the readings said as well, like in English classes, you're always reading your novel outside of class. You come to an English class not to sit in the class to read a novel. You come to discuss the novel after you've read it. So the model has been applied. So we looked at other strategies that we found that were outside of like using your recording your lectures and students doing this prep work before they come in. So some of the things that we found to engage students in the classroom, if you still had a lecture, if you wanted to start slowly, was like self-check questions. So one faculty member in accounting said, you know, I again said exactly what you said. I tried it this way, it didn't work. Then I got totally confused because I see the value in it, but I can't get anywhere with it. So what was decided was, in the reading that I read, was did a standard lecture, stood up, what stopped every so many slides or so many minutes, and did a little quiz with the clickers to assess were they understanding what or using their cell phones or whatever, were they understanding the concept. So self-check questions were just done exactly, and the questions weren't, one thing that came out in the economics was the question wasn't to memorize or repeat back what the lecture was just about, was taking the concept that you just discussed and now asking to apply it to a new context. So not to say, did you get this definition or repeat this definition and say multiple choice type thing. It was to actually take that concept and apply it to another new context.
It's no good saying use clickers. You don't have clickers. You don't know where to buy them. You don't have to hook up to the technology or anything.
Right, they're here in the university, and you can get them, and again, from the, you can bring them into the classrooms, in any classroom.
on phones now.
Yeah,
and they're on cell phones.
There's ways they can connect with the phone. I'm happy to share those with you, David.
Yeah. And also there is within the instructional development office at our area, there's clickers.
You can borrow.
What's the set of clickers cost?
Don't know, it depends on which one, but I can find out.
And you can actually borrow them from the university, like there is a set of clickers that you can just bring right into the classroom. Some have used cell phones, as you said, but then knowing those, what software to use on your cell phone, that sort of thing. But that's one thing where we could come in to help, because again, what we found with the literature was that the research said that one of the weaknesses was the faculty, exactly, you don't have these resources and you don't have this available to you, so what do? So that's where we could come in as a teaching learning center, sort of is, I have this idea, run it by us, and then we'll investigate where you can get the clickers, we'll investigate what you could try. We can almost probably even come over and walk through, like stay in a classroom for one session, who knows, right? But what extreme that we could go. But we could look into that for you also, then get the cost, and then you can talk to your dean about purchasing clickers. So that's some of the resources that are available, is to, because we don't have all the answers either. We're within a unit, and again, we know clickers are available, but I would have to walk downstairs and say, now where do I go to get the clickers? I know they're available, but I want to use them in my classroom.
In a box.
In a box. Also, the other one was discussion and debate on topics. So like for and we've tried this with some faculty members here as well, with some case analysis. I don't know if anybody want to comment on how you do your cases in class, like activities you form by some cases that you have students read, and then what you do with students? What activities they do in class?
Depends on the students. So with the MBAs, like I use longer, what I would say Harvard style cases. For my undergraduates, I realized they're not reading them. They're not dated.
Right.
So I've gotten down to shorter dilemmas, like 1 or 2 pages, and then really, because I'm trying to get them to critically analyze the situation, identify problems, which is my learning outcome, can you identify the problem?
Right.
So I'll just put up a page, and then you know, I make sure I know all their names, so I pick on them. You know,
Right.
yeah.
So nothing new here. That's Flippy in the classroom is slowly starting to do it in that you're trying to encourage them. Hopefully by halfway through the class, or if they do more courses, they catch on that they actually have to do the readings before they come in.
Yeah.
And having a debate, like trying to persuade each other, so on what they've decided. Featured guest speakers, and Lyle tapped to that as well, bringing in guest speakers. The next 3, some of the reading that we read talked about students, there's some students, the introverts, they want to sit back and reflect, because even Jane and I were talking about, both of us, how we like to learn. And I'm more of an extrovert and she's more of an introvert, and likes to sit back and reflect, where I get, I guess, more passionate and learn best when I can talk with a group and brainstorm ideas and write that. So one of the things we talked about, I never really occurred to me, was the flipped approach. What do you do if you are in a class with introverts who prefer to sit back and reflect? And the next 3, some of you are quite familiar with them: think, write, and share, writing prompts, and the SWOT analysis. There was some research on that in the readings as well, where in business and in economics, they started classes using these approaches first as well, and getting students to, giving them time to think. If you asked them to do something before class, like write up a short, read the article and write a strong summary of the case, then coming into class and not immediately jumping into that, letting them sit back, read the case, what their summary they wrote up, then sit with another smaller group for a few minutes to read over it, and then see if they want to reflect on it, make any changes, then actually come together and do a debate. So little tips like that we found that it seemed to work for some people.
Doing that sort of thing gives the students an opportunity to prepare and to become familiar with the content or the case in question, but also to reflect upon it overnight or over a couple of nights. They've written their notes, and then when they come into class, they take the few minutes to reacquaint themselves with their thinking on it, and then to share it with somebody else. And then their thinking may or may not change, but it could become clarified. And then they're ready. It's all more current again. It's all recalled and current in their mind. And then they're ready to then take it to the next step, which is applying it, which is what you need them to be able to do, to be able to apply it to a novel situation.
And do you want to speak to the next one, the role of a day?
A role of a day is something that you would use for a group or collaborative type activity. And each time, if you're using cases or problems, for example, which are fairly standard in business, then you could have different roles for the students, and each time they come to class, or as you would change a module or a topic, they would switch the roles. So when they're discussing the material or discussing the results of their analysis of a case, then there could be a scribe, there could be a chair, there could be somebody whose job it is to look at the pros in relation to a topic, in relation to a concept for the case, and then somebody looks at the cons. And then the next time they come, then they're going to switch those roles. So it changes it up a little bit and gives everybody an opportunity to play on their strengths, but to contribute to the learning process.
And one that I didn't have was here as well that we read was use a contract with students. So in your course syllabus, you outline it and then ask them to, so for example, one faculty member put down their contract was to have the students commit to preparing before class and instructors commit to flexibility in facilitating the student learning during class by allowing sufficient time for discussion, exploration of challenging topics in depth, not redoing what they just read, answering their questions, and problem solving, that sort of thing. So putting that right up front and having getting students to commit to it. And I think you've alluded to that where you were saying you discussed that in your first class, telling students, this is the type of course that this is. Right? The couple other things just in summary that, Mary got
no, just to the clicker thing.
Yeah.
Just about $700 max. Someone asked about the price.
I found $50 each.
Yeah, for 700 for 24.
Yeah.
$1,600 for 32 plus software and
Yeah.
headset.
Yeah. Yeah. We can send you some information on that because we know.